You're listening to Trek FM.
Hello and welcome to From There to Here, Trek FM's 50th anniversary rewatch of Star Trek, in which we look at all 729 episodes from beginning to end. I'm Mike, and I'm joined today by Lee from the Nerd Party. How's it going, Lee?
Not too bad, thanks. Yourself, Mike?
I'm doing okay. We're talking about 2 episodes of Voyager today, Heroes and Demons and Cathexis. So let's get started with Heroes and Demons. This is, I'm pretty sure, the first Voyager malfunctioning holodeck episode.
And the last, I think.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I don't think they ever do it again 6 times a season.
Well, that's Heroes and Demons. Yes, it's the episode where Harry Kim gets stuck in the holodeck playing Beowulf, and they think that he may be in there as an energy something or other, so they send the doctor in to save him. And yes, what do you think about this episode?
I'm not a big fan of this episode. That it was a bit of a chore to watch yesterday, and the only thing that I always stood out for me was that this was like Janeway hairstyle number 2 of the 7 years. It was never an episode I really enjoyed as a kid. I remembered renting this one from Blockbuster because we were like a year and a half behind America in getting Voyager, so I would have to rely on these 4 episode VHS cassettes to catch it with Voyager. I remember watching this one and just thinking, oh no, this is pretty poor. I think I even saw this episode maybe before Caretaker, actually. I could be wrong. And it was just an episode I just found kind of really boring. I really like the Doctor. I think the moment about him getting excited to go on his first away mission and that he doesn't want to let the crew down, like a really sweet and touching scene. But I just find the A plot about Beowulf and the B plot about this sun energy just pretty uninspiring stuff that I think it's only really dragged up by Robert Picardo.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with you. I mean, I don't think that I dislike it as much as you do, but I do think that Robert Picardo does elevate it, and I think it's interesting for his character, for sure, you know, in terms of the Doctor's growth and everything. But, you know, the malfunctioning holodeck thing was already played out by now, and seeing it here, it's just like, boy, you know, it really does feel like these people are always shocked whenever it happens, but it happens all the freaking time. I guess it's kind of interesting, the idea of, you know, like someone being turned into energy and, you know, needing to use the whatever technology in order to get them back. The whole Beowulf cosplay thing didn't really work for me either. But I'm not a huge fan of Beowulf to begin with, so, you know, maybe that has something to do with it. But yeah, on the whole, a pretty weak episode, all things considered.
I don't think anyone actually behind the scenes really knew as well that was it Nara Shankar? I'm not very good with this.
Nareen Shankar, yeah.
Yeah, she was the one behind this story, and she pitched it to the Voyager cast team. And none of them really knew who Beowulf was, and she kind of assumed everyone would be aware of it, that it would be kind of recommended reading at school. So I think when that could have been an indication quite early on that if these sci-fi writers, who kind of probably share a lot of the same interests and backgrounds as the average Star Trek fan, doesn't really know what Beowulf is that really an idea worth pursuing and throwing it out there to the wider Star Trek network? I don't know. I think that was maybe an indication it was maybe not the best road to go down.
Yeah. You know, Nareen Shankar, it's actually a he. I just saw him yesterday, and he's gone on to. He started off as like the science advisor on Next Gen, and he's gone on to great success. He was the showrunner on CSI for a while, and now he's the showrunner on The Expanse. It's pretty cool, and also
there we go.
Apparently a big Laserdisc fan. So there you go.
Who isn't?
Yeah. The one thing which always stood out to me about this was the doctor's name, because there was like a thing, and I remember this, and because back in the day, it's like here we're all anxiously awaiting, or actually by the time this comes out, I think we'll probably know, about details for Disco, Star Trek Discovery. Back in the day, no one cared. They just told you everything, including like things which were not fully developed. And I remember going to a con, my very first con, and this was in like 94 or early 94. Yeah, it had to be early 94. And they were talking about, the plans for Voyager, and they were giving a rundown of the entire crew. And, one of the things that they said was there's going to be a doctor, and his name was, Doc Zimmerman, and blah, 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 and he was named after his, creator and all this stuff. And then, he doesn't have a name. It's just Doctor. But all of the press and everything always said Doc Zimmerman. And I kept on waiting for him to get his name. And here, they're talking about, you need to come up with a name, come up with it before you leave. And then he says Schweitzer, and I'm like, wait, what? And then, he gets rid of it at the end. And, later on, I read that basically people, they were like taking their time with the doctor's name, and people kept on hounding Rick Berman about it because it was in all of the press stuff or whatever that his name was Zimmerman, and people kept on saying, when are you going to call him Zimmerman? When's it going to happen? That finally Berman was like, I'm just annoyed by everyone. I think we should just not give him a name. And that the rest is history.
I remember that same thing as well. Like, Zimmerman. I think even was on one of the toys. I could be wrong. One of the Doctor action figures back in the day. But like, even I knew on the other side of the pond that this guy was Doc Zimmerman, and it was always one of those ones that was like, they're going to call it Doc Zimmerman eventually. It was almost felt like you were just building to get to that point. And even as far as season 7, you thought, well, they're going to come back and they'll call it Doc Zimmerman, and then they settle with what they do. But that was a bizarre period. But I suppose if it's not on screen, it doesn't really count, I guess.
Yeah, definitely true. All right, well, should we move on to our second episode for today? Cathexis. Now, this is the episode where Tuvok and Chakotay come back from an away mission in a shuttle pod in a nebula or something like that, and Chakotay is unconscious, and all of a sudden, people start doing strange things on the ship. Tom Paris lays in a weird course, and he says that he didn't do it. He says that's absolutely not what happened. And then, B'Elanna Torres shuts down the warp core, and she's like, what are you talking about? I totally didn't do that. And people are doing these weird things but have no memory of what it is. And it's revealed that there's some alien entity on the ship which is taking over people's bodies and making them do things that they don't want to do. And it becomes sort of a Thing scenario, as in John Carpenter's The Thing, where people don't know who to trust because they don't know whose bodies have been taken over by this alien being. So what did you think about Cathexis?
Well, I've got a kind of split relationship with it. That it was one of the first Star Trek Voyager VHSs that I bought as a kid, that I can still to this day remember what it was like. It was Voyager in front of this big green planet, and as a kid, like, I didn't have the greatest amount of Star Trek videos. I kind of had to make do with what was on the TV. But I always remember, just like, if it was like a sick day or a boring weekend, you would kind of watch the videos you got. And I think I watched this episode over and over to the extent that I got kind of sick of it. But then watching it again yesterday, I actually kind of really liked it a lot more than I remembered. That I really like this moody Voyager where the lights are all kind of dimmed, everyone's a bit suspicious of each other, and it's quite interesting to see what would have been quite interesting in terms of season 1 of having this not sure who's on which side, who trusts who, what people's motives are, and that's probably as closest we get almost to conflict in season 1 of Voyager, and it takes possessed aliens to do it. You know, it doesn't matter that they're the Maquis, that's all fine, but possessed aliens, that's the first sign we get of real tension. So I really enjoyed it. It was quite fun to watch, and you know, it was genuinely mysterious, and I think Tuvok being this kind of meddlesome character is quite interesting. I mean, it's totally obvious when you kind of watch it back knowing, but I think it's actually a pretty enjoyable episode all around. It's, you know, it's, I think I maybe don't give season 1 as much credit as it deserves, really.
Yeah, it's a decent mystery, you know. I mean, it's certainly heavy on the sort of like horror, you know, plot, you know, and that sort of thing, like The Thing or the Invasion of the Body Snatchers or whatever. But I think that it's a decent episode. It's kind of an interesting mystery, you know. I don't exactly understand the whole Chakotay thing, but, you know, whatever. It's all good. And there's some things where, I mean, like, you know, I don't think that they did a very good job with, you know, sort of some of the clues and figuring out, you know, some of the things that the characters would realize and not realize. Like, you know, there's the whole thing where like Tuvok and Kes go into the turbolift, and then they both come out and they're unconscious, and Tuvok wakes up and Kes is, you know, still unconscious, and they're like, oh, you know, this is because of some sort of like physical trauma, not because she was possessed or whatever. And they're like, that's weird. She's got some weird bruises like on these, you know, this nerve bundle or whatever. And it's like, okay, clearly Tuvok was possessed, and, you know, Vulcan nerve pinched her, right? I mean, that's like so obvious from, you know, the clues. And yet, you know, Tuvok is like, you know, goes up to Janeway and is like, yeah, I don't quite understand what happened. And Janeway's like, maybe you were possessed and Vulcan nerve pinched her. And Tuvok, who's the security officer and a Vulcan and super logical, is like, I didn't think of that. That's really interesting, you know? And yet,
by the end of that conversation as well, she's given him the command codes as well, that she goes from being really suspicious of him to going, well, yeah, I suppose we should split up the command codes, so I'll have half, you have the other half. So it's a bit of a come down from Janeway.
Right, exactly. And then, you know, like, but then later in the episode, you know, Chakotay possesses Neelix and moves some stones around on a board, and Janeway's like, perhaps it's a map. Maybe those are planets. And then once they figure out that that's what it is, they're like, follow a course which goes along each of those planets. And it's like, wait a minute, what? How did you get that out of someone moving a few stones around? You know, that's you know, a bit of a stretch, but what can you do? You know.
Yeah, I suppose they had to do something with the Indian board and stuff. It's not like they would add in. It seemed to always be the thing, that Chakotay's Indian heritage was only ever there to advance some sort of plot device or make a plot begin. So, yeah, I suppose they couldn't just have him just celebrating some sort of Indian tradition, that they had to have it going, well, we'll use it as a map.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I yesterday I was in Vegas and I saw the Voyager panel with, well, a lot of the actors were up there, but including Robert Beltran, and he was very critical of the way that he was portrayed on the show. His character was portrayed, and, you know, he basically said, like, you know, if it weren't for me, you know, I would have been in like a full like headdress for every episode, you know, and it would have been extremely stereotypical in terms of, you know, the portrayal, but you know, they toned it down a lot, you know, when I started complaining. So, yeah, you know, they didn't quite nail that one for sure, but what can you do?
What can you do?
All right. Well, I guess that pretty much wraps up today's episodes. Lee, where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, you can find me at Lee_Nostromo. You can find me on my own podcast with To The Journeys, Tristan Riddell and Matt Hansen on the Senate floor. And you can find me sharing Star Trek video covers for people that might be interested in that at Star Trek VHS.
And you can find me right here on Trek FM doing Stage 9, where we talk about the people who make Star Trek. And you can also find me on Twitter at Mumbles3K. Well, thanks for joining me today, Lee. And we will be back tomorrow to talk about 2 more episodes of Star Trek, Faces and Explorers.